الخير جميعا. حلقة اليوم حتكون باللغة الإنجليزية. So I'll switch to English right now. Today we have honorable guests with us, celebrities. I don't know if you guys would like to be called that, but two film directors from the Syrian scene, Rana and Anas. Your most known film, I think, or two films would be Mare Nostrum and The Translator, المترجم. So before we get to talk about films in Syria, we want to know a bit more about you guys. Who are Rana and Anas?
يلا تفضل أنس.
الذي بزيادة تفضلي.
Um, I'm Syrian American French. My father is Syrian from Hama in the north, and my mom is American of Polish descent. I was born in France. I am a storyteller, and that's basically what I have focused on even since I was a child. I knew that stories were something very meaningful to me, and even though my path and my life sort of took me in different directions as a storyteller, that's sort of been the through line that exists throughout everything. So I was an actor for a long time. I studied acting. That was my undergraduate degree, was in theater. And then my master's, my MFA is in acting, and I studied also acting at the Moscow Art Theater in Russia twice. And sort of became really disillusioned by the kind of stories that I was being asked to be a part of. And this is when I started to think about, what it would mean instead to, as a storyteller, rather than be an actor, to write, to produce, to direct. And I went to film school. And right after film school, I met Ennis. Ennis and I met, and he said, why don't you, come move to Damascus and we'll make films there. I said, sure, let's go do it. And so that's what I did. And of course, we stayed, I stayed there up until 2011, and Ennis will tell his story. We went back to the States for a few years. Then we wanted to get back to the region. We went to Amman, made a few films. And then I was given this position at Northwestern University in Qatar, which I love, which is I'm a professor of filmmaking, narrative filmmaking here. And we've been in Qatar now almost 9 years.
All right. And how was the transition back to Syria after you moved back with Anas?
Well, you mean when I first moved there in 2006?
Yeah.
So my trips to Syria had always just been for visits. I had never lived there before. And as I mentioned, my family is from Hama. So a lot of the Syria that I knew was Hama. And a big part, unfortunately, of that history of being from Hama was this massacre that took place there in 82. And so I think a lot of, what I think of in terms of the Assad regime and what happened in Hama clouded a lot, or, impacted a lot of what my connection, my relationship to Syria was. And when, I met Enes and he said, let's move to Damascus, Enes showed me a very different side of Syria that I hadn't been a part of, which I was really grateful for. And it was challenging to live there, but also, it's once you find your tribe, once you find your people, it all started to work out. And I would say up until the moment the revolution started, I was at a place where I really began to love my life there and was really excited about making independent cinema in the country. I was writing a lot. We had two little kids, so I was taking care of them as well. But I was also teaching at the American Language Center, and also at a media institute. So I was teaching students as well there. And when we left, we never thought that we were leaving permanently. I had packed a suitcase, this common story, for a month, thinking we'd be back. We had the kids enrolled in school for the fall and never went back. And this past December, so I left in May 2011 and just went back for the first time now, December 2025. And I can't wait to go back.
Yeah. Anas?
Yes, thank you for having us. Very similar and very different at the same time, story and path as Rana. But definitely my childhood and life has been marked by a dual path. I was born in Syria, but I moved to France, to Paris with my mother when I was 3 years old, and I did all my school and education in France, and I became a little French guy with the Syrian background, and only to move back to Syria when I was 15 in the middle of adolescence, 1989. Very, very dark period in Syria. Syria was really diplomatically isolated at that time with Hafiz Assad and embargo and you name it. It was very vivid memories of us moving back in 89 for a very obscure reason. My parents never really told me why we were moving back. I learned why years later. And it was a very difficult time. And then I moved back to France so I finished high school at that time, and then I moved back to France for university, wanting to study cinema because I loved images and stories since I was really little, and something that was strangely enough given to me by my parents, who had a lot of VHS tapes when we were kids at home, because they loved watching films, and they showed me films from a very young age. And when I told them I want to study cinema and make films, they said, "No way, you're doing business, because this is a family of businessmen, and there's a family business you have to take over because you are the first son." And of course my brother and sister, who were very dedicated to the family, but knew, strangely enough, my parents knew my siblings were not meant for that. And really, they're not meant for that. They work for international organizations. They work for NGOs. They work for, not at all in the business. So, yeah, so they didn't let me go to cinema to learn cinema, and so I went to business school in France, and I learned business only to take over the family business years later. And at the same time, I wanted to make films and become a filmmaker and tell stories through image. So this is the really dual path I've had since really a very, very long time. And I managed to do both. When I met Rana, we started making films, as she mentioned, together. And I kept doing the business side of my duty, of my life. And I often say, when people ask me, "What do you do?" I say morning or afternoon, because in the morning I do business, in the afternoon I make films, and that's been going on for 20 plus years. So really, a duality in my life is definitely something that defines me, and even now today, continuing in this concept and theme of duality, I make films, moving images, and I do photography also, still images, and I do these two art forms in a very different way, because we'll talk about it now with Rana. We make fiction films with Rana, and I do documentary photography. So we can talk about it a little.
So you do two forms of art. Is photography the fifth?
The photography is the 10th.
10th form of art.
Yeah,
and cinema is the 7th.
Cinema, and photography is the 10th, because then you have 8 is video games, 9 is comic books, and 10 is photography.
So photography is seen as a more complex form of cinema. Is that how it goes, or not necessarily?
I don't know, not necessarily, but I think the classification is made like that, and the first 6 are the classic ones, sculpture and painting, etc., poetry and music. But it's commonly known as cinema, the 7th art, because it unites the first 6
forms,
all in one. That's why cinema is supposedly the most elevated one, let's say.
So
I agree.
Yeah. So you've both had like an in and out relationship with the country over the years, and did that impact you as people? Like, I feel this because Abdul-Rahman can probably relate to this too, because I've lived most of my life outside of Syria, mainly for economic reasons, that my parents had to migrate in the 80s due to the whole collapse of the country in the 80s. But then post 2009, the reason sort of becomes political for my dad, because he went head to head with Rai Makhlouf at some point, and we had to pack our things and leave. So I've always lived that duality of, I'm from this country. Inside the house we have this mini Syria where we do our thing, and then outside of the house it's a completely different society that I had to adapt to. I had to speak a different dialect, growing up in the Gulf, because for some reason the kids when I was growing up didn't understand what I was saying as Syrian, and I wanted to relate, so I would speak whatever dialect they would speak. And there is also the part where I speak English, because I eventually, when I came to Qatar, I had an international education. I studied at American and British universities. So there is this part of me that is not Syrian that I navigate the world with because I had to. Add to that, I don't have any other document besides a Syrian passport, so I also had to navigate the world bureaucratically as Syrian. So there are levels to this dual life that Syrians have lived outside of Syria, and there's this group that grew exponentially after the revolution of exiled Syrians for one reason or another. So how did that impact your own personalities, your life? How did you navigate the world as this multi-level? And even going back to Syria, that impacts who you are, right? Because people look at you as the person who came from abroad.
Of course, and if I can answer that, Rana. Since I was a kid, from 3 years old, going back to Syria 2 times, maybe sometimes 3 times a year, because my dad stayed in Syria and my mom was in Paris with me, then my brother, then my sister, who were born both of them in Paris. Since then, I was this Syrian French kid going back to Syria. So I had this dual citizenship, dual culture, dual nationality, dual way of life since a very, very young age. And not after 2011, like millions of Syrians who left. I've lived this all my life. And since I was a kid, family and, broad family, always asked me, what do you prefer, Syria or France, France or Syria, etc. I always was asked this question, very classic question in the Middle East when you come from abroad. And I would always answer both, but of course in my inner self, I preferred France because it was so much more comfortable and developed than Syria was. And this was the child, immature, young person answering with the immediate comfort and immediately what I saw in front of me. And then as I grew up and I moved to Syria in 89, I was 15, I started to shift this point of view. And then I moved back to France for studying, and I worked, and I lived in the US, and I lived in many countries. And then I moved back to Syria finally 2003, just to finish what I was saying earlier, to take over the business and the family business. That was 2003. We met with Rana in 2006, and Rana and the kids left in 2011. I left in 2012. That's the chronology of it. And just to finish on that. And finally, when I became an adult and a more mature person, I think, remembering that I used to think I prefer France, then I realized I actually prefer Syria. When asked this question, very
why is that?
Solution. Because I realized the authenticity and the tradition was from Syria, and the modernity and less genuine side of life was Europe and France. And I realized that as I was growing up, and I felt, and I still feel now more drawn, more attached to the authenticity of what it is to be a person, a human being, And I think Syria has this authenticity, kept this authenticity through the years, also because it was so closed and lived in autarcie more than any other country, I think, and that has some very, very bad effect on the population, but also some good ones of keeping things really genuine, and people helping each other and living together. I think I haven't seen that in other cultures and populations. So I feel very, very attached to that.
And I'm sorry for the question, Rana. Like, you can hate me for it. Like, your Arabic is not advanced. Anas can speak.
Yes,
fluent,
it's
right?
not. Yeah. No, Anas is fluent. I'm not.
So how did that like make you feel moving back to Damascus?
Well, the problem with English is that everybody speaks it. So, and but in Syria also a lot of our community was French speaking, and I speak French, and so I was able to get by with the English and the French. That said, I did do my best with the Arabic. I wish I was better at it than I am.
So it wasn't like an obstacle. You didn't feel like you're alienated because of the language barrier. And the reason I'm asking this is it's a bit more political, because like right now we hear all these discussions that were, of course, created by Hafez al-Assad about there's only one language in the country. No one else is allowed to speak anything else. Even in media, you guys do film and media, so you know this better than me. But there's a focus historically in Syria on portraying the whole country as Damascus, and I don't see this in a way where I'm dissing Damascus. On the contrary, I lived there for 2 years and I love the city. But there was this like shift in the history of the country through state media, where it's portrayed only as that one city and there's only one dialect, and that has of course led to the marginalization of the rich linguistic and cultural aspect of the country. We have Armenians, Caucasians, Dagestanis, Turkmen, right? Like the Kurds, of course. So the reason I'm asking is because I'm interested to see, like, as a Syrian who doesn't have Arabic as their ace, how did it feel interacting with the wider society, not necessarily your closer
I mean, it's the only regret I have in my life is that I don't speak it better. I think I could have been, on the whole, a much more impactful person with my life had I been able to speak Arabic. I think I could have done many more things. And that's too bad. That's too bad. Yeah.
But if you, I would like to we spoke of the duality of being a Syrian and an American and a Syrian and a French, and I'd like to touch on another duality that I used to feel like growing up hearing about Syria from my father, my late father, and at the same time hearing about Syria from Jordanian friends who used to go like as tourists to Syria and see the beautiful scenery. And both to me were myths. The myth of a beautiful Syria, the myth
Totally.
of like the political repression,
Yeah.
and but growing up, like started to see like some of this and some of that. What I found interesting is that you mentioned that Hama, the memory of the massacre that actually existed in people's mind before 2011. I want to do you remember like how people used to talk about this? Because
Yeah.
many Syrians had this hidden secret outside Syria that if you say it, like if you try to explain it to someone, they would not like know it's actually a beautiful country where we go have fun. And like, how did people talk about this? Were they like, but don't mention it, like telling you the story and being like, be careful, don't say this to anyone?
I didn't have that experience. On the contrary, we lost 15 family members in the massacre. And so I grew up hearing the stories of how they died. And in fact, some family then had to flee Syria during that time, and they would come live with us. And so I also have this experience of, dealing with the trauma, living as a young teenager, living and seeing their trauma. And I remember that I had nightmares all the time at that moment, because it just, it's, the stories are horrific.
Yes.
And
were you self-aware, like when you were like talking to people, I need to not mention that I'm from Hama, I need to not mention this story, like especially inside Syria?
So
Or were like old
yeah.
people like, so I'm sorry, like old people trying to like
Sweep it under the rug.
instruct you, like no, and tell you like, guys, khalas, don't mention this.
I tend to be this way in my life, but no, I basically just told everybody all the time that this is where I was from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like what we like described me and Badr like at a time, like this, like a new discovery of self, especially after the liberation, new discovery of the Syrian identity. Like you like start actually talking, start reading the books that you were afraid to read some, or you were like, please, like try to remove it from your memory. You're trying to rediscover this, like for me and for many people, I'm trying to like tell our stories in a different way. And this podcast is one way to like meet you guys, meet new people, and tell our stories.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you're doing that. The thing also, just to talk about Hama again, is that when you go back to Hama even today, you can feel the trauma of the massacre. It never left. It's very present. And I've talked to people who've just gone to visit as tourists, and they hadn't known that the massacre happened. And then later, when they read the history, it started to make sense why there was this a collective trauma.
Yeah. I mean, we've had Dr. Marwa Sabuni, who actually teaches in Hama. She's an architect from Homs.
Okay.
And we spoke with her about how the actual architecture of the city impacts how people behave, think, interact.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who haven't been to Hama, because Syrians don't travel through the country, like the impact of the destruction from 82 is still there. Like you can actually walk
Yes.
through the rubble until today.
Yes.
Because some parts of the old city were just left as is, as like a reminder by the Assad regime that if you ever try this
Exactly.
again, this is. So yeah, definitely it impacts, and I wonder how like it's going to impact the future generations of Syrians. I'm from Homs, and I can tell you
Yeah.
like the tension in the city between, let's say, the Alawites and the Sunnis is constantly fed by the fact that if you walk in Homs, it's just destroyed. Like 80% of it is
Right.
destroyed. But if
Right.
you go to another neighborhood that was affiliated with the regime or had a majority of like army officers living there, it's untouched. So it becomes very difficult for people from like the old city of Homs, for example, Khaldiyeh, Bayada, and all these areas to go to that other neighborhood and not feel offended or angry because these people were unharmed and I was harmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I like here I wanna shift a bit to Mare Nostrum, our sea, as the Romans used to call it, right?
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
this theme of the sea has become, from my observation, very present in the alternative art scene in Syria. I'm saying this because if I'm listening to some of the artists that are refugees in Europe, like Bukulthum, for example, the theme is there because he saw it with his own eyes. He saw people, or he met people that have seen people who have drowned. He has seen people that have drowned. Other artists and other refugees in Syria and in Europe been through the experience themselves. The Mediterranean is something that was traditionally beloved by Syrians. We are very proud of being Mediterranean people. We all interact with the Mediterranean one way or another. The in cities always wanted to buy property near the sea, right? But with Mare Nostrum, we see a different like relationship between the Syrian man, his daughter, and the sea. It's a very complex one. You wanna tell us a bit more about it? I can say what I think in my own analysis of it, but I want to hear you.
Yeah. I mean, we'd love to hear your analysis. We've talked about the film a lot.
Well, I mean, we see the father who's observing another man teaching his daughter how to swim.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
talk about this, Rana, in some of your interviews of
Yeah.
this duality in the film of this. I'm presumably a European person or Turkish who's interacting with
Yeah.
his daughter in the scene. To them, this is a time of leisure.
Yeah.
The Syrian father is looking at this as this is a
Yeah.
means of survival, but it's also this
Yeah.
beast that I can't tame, but I want to teach my daughter how to tame somehow so she
Yeah.
can survive. Um, so what I'm trying to ask is like, how do you think the past 15 years have impacted what we traditionally might have thought of as a symbol of our culture?
Mm.
How did the war change that over the past 15 years?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see the Mediterranean Sea the same anymore. It's a very changed place for me. And I think I became, because of the war, because of the recognition of how many, the 24 countries that border on the sea, and how many, how some of them, how for some countries it's the most, like you said, expensive real estate that's in the world. And then on the other hand, it becomes a burial site for so many other people. And I mean, this was also the intention of calling it Mare Nostrum, was there was this, irony about, it's a body of water. How do people think about how you split this up? I mean, how do you make a border with this movable element, and the idea that somebody could risk their life, pay $10,000 for, a 45-minute boat ride, and then, along the way, maybe lose their life, be shot at, encounter people who want to see you drown. But there was also a lot of humanity in the whole thing. I mean, people who were who came from all over the country. volunteered, uh, to be ready for those people when they touched ground, for those that made it. And even the, some of the Coast Guards, the boats were out there, of course, to deter the people from coming, but others were there to save them. But it's kind of mixed up, this whole strange thing about where we as humans decide to unify, because on the north, you've got Europe, right? So is this a European body of water? Do they have more claim to it than North Africans do, or people from the Levant do? I mean, it all becomes this very strange idea that we've embraced as humans. But no, the sea is a changed place for me forever now. I see it as it's become a very complicated political space.
Anas, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, so I think that's it. I mean, this film has been shown so many times in so many festivals, cinemas, universities, schools over the years. It's 2017, almost 10 years now, and still very vivid and very present. People still talk about it and mention it. It's going to be shown in New York next March, in 3 months, at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, BAM. So it's still very actuality from the news. Yani. Of course, we don't talk about this anymore. Other issues in the region, but what for me was very important in this film is how the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, is actually the main character of the film, and this was so striking and so relevant when we made this film, to think of this, like Rana said, this immense body of water being so important for millions and millions of people all throughout this area, dual area, Europe and the South, the Europe and the global South. So it's still very moving when we watch it, because sometimes we go to screening and we watch it again. Of course, our daughter, Zayn, is the main character, is the main actress of the film, along with Ziad Bakri. So it's even more moving to see her when she was only 7 years old. Now she just turned 17 last week. And this will remain really a very, very intense memory in our life, artistic life, but regular life as well. Yeah, this film is very special.
Yeah.
I have to say.
So what got you both into film? Like I can, if you ask me what was the first movie that got me into film, I could probably conjure up like 10 movies that gradually made me a cinephile. So what got you guys into it? And why Syria? Like you're both like multi identities. Why did you choose to speak about Syria and not something else?
So this is where English language is very particular, because there's a difference in English between movies and films. It's a difference you don't have in Arabic or in French or in Spanish. And I love this distinction that is made in English, movies being more the entertainment, Hollywood productions, and film is more the art house, independent works. And so probably we can claim with Rana that we make films. And as a kid, I was mentioning earlier, my parents used to watch a lot of films, movies also, but films. And very young, I was maybe seven, I was watching VHS films, tapes from the living room. And they were in original language, in version originale. So that was also very, very intense for me to watch at a very young age English films in English and not dubbed in French. I watched a film called Le Cid, El Cid, by Anthony Mann, 1962, with Charlton Heston and Sophia Loren. Not really a film for children, but it was there, and it was with battles. And I said, okay, I'm going to watch this. And I put it in and I watched it, and it was like 3 hours long. And at the end, Charlton Heston dies. He gets an arrow and he dies. And I had watched at this age already some Star Wars and some other Hollywood movies, obviously, as a kid. And he dies, and I was so affected, I started to cry. And I remember that story very, very clearly. I started to cry, but I thought that was an abnormality. I shouldn't be crying. So I went to hide in my room because I was crying. I didn't want my mother to see me cry. And as I was hiding, and my mom at some point was calling me, and I wasn't answering because I was so affected, I realized how powerful the film could be and provoke such emotions in a person as little as a 6-7-year-old boy. And that really changed me forever. That was really the beginning for me of what the power of cinema simply. Yeah. That's the story.
I have a very similar one. When I was a child, and my parents took me to go see Charlotte's Web. And like Anis, I was so moved, couldn't believe how moved I was by a story, and was really taken by what stories do. And I mean, when I think now, because I'm writing this other film, which is, it's actually a film about storytelling and storytellers, set in Damascus in 1960. And when we think about all the things a story does, it might be the best thing that we can do as human beings. It's taught us to survive. It teaches us compassion. It teaches us history. They inspire. They do so many, 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 many things.
Would you say Syrian cinema is a bit like poor and underdeveloped? I can think like the most impactful 2 Syrian film that I've seen were not like shown in theaters. I came across one of them by accident. It was in the library of Georgetown when I was studying there. We had a huge collection of DVDs, and I would just go through it alphabetically until one day I got the letter T, and the first one I pulled out was The Syrian Bride. It's a Syrian movie from the 80s or the 90s, if I'm not wrong. It's about at the border of the Golan Heights. We have a bride on one side and a groom on the other. Very, very tragic, very slow film.
Yeah.
I watched this and I was like, what is this? But then it made me realize this is the reality of people when the border got divided. And then the second one was in 1993, starring Bassam Kusa. It's called Kombars. And I looked after that, and then I couldn't find any really good options. It was mostly state propaganda, or there's also The Flood in the Country of Al-Ba'ath. If people from our listeners have
Omar
not seen
Amir
this,
That's
a must-watch. Yeah. But when you look beyond this, you know that, like, you realize, at least that's what I've come across, that the number of really good films that came from Syria over the past 100 years is very limited, as opposed to Egypt, for example, or even North Africa. Has a very rich cinematic history, whether in the diaspora in France through Bourg Cinema and similar things, or through actual like homeland made movies in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Mauritania. So would you say Syria is underdeveloped compared to the rest of the region, and why is that, if that's the case?
For sure it's underdeveloped. Even if we consider before the revolution, before 2011, there were 1 or 2 films. We're talking feature films for cinema, whether documentary or fiction, made in Syria per year, which is an unbelievable small number of productions. And this is, of course, directly linked to the to the regime, the Assad regime, wanting full control on any production, artistic production, making sure the propaganda was respected, making sure the apparatus, censorship apparatus was working fully, and not letting anything get made in Syria because they didn't want stories and, subtext stories be made in a way that the regime would not understand it, and then audiences around the world would understand. So simply for them, it was easier not to let anything be made. So this is how I see it, and of course it has affected the creativity, unfortunately, of art house cinema. While on the other hand, before 2011, a little bit after, but mainly before, the production of Ramadan series was unbelievably high, and there were more than 30, 40 series per Ramadan. You had the choice between 30 different TV series to watch during Ramadan, all of them mostly similar with the same actors over and over again, but very, very popular. So popular that the people across the Middle East, we're talking North Africa to the Levant to the Gulf, often said to us with Rana, when we say we're Syrians, we're making cinema, oh, the best actors are from Syria, the best TV series are from Syria, which is unfortunately totally untrue, because it's so corny and so unsophisticated. I think, this is my words personally, that you cannot say this is the best. The best of what? I mean, really. So I'm not very proud of the production of TV series from Syria. I wish they had made more films, but unfortunately, not enough films at all. Of course, after 9/11 and after the diaspora started to be creating art and films, mainly documentaries, but also fictions, this whole changed. There was a big shift. We can talk about that later now or in a bit. And this completely changed the production landscape of cinema in Syria. Alhamdulillah, for the better. But the shift is that people with no qualification or training for cinema became filmmakers just by wanting to report what was happening. And this is mainly with documentaries after 2011, starting to film what was happening in their neighborhood, in their streets, and also for those who had crossed borders and left, whether with a passport or just risking their lives, like we said, in the sea, or going just to Lebanon, or going just to Jordan, which was already a big danger, or to Turkey and beyond, started to tell their stories with a camera, because any small cameras or any mobile phone became an instrument to tell a story. And that changed everything, because suddenly after 2011, so many films were coming out from Syrians, whereas before there was almost no films at all. So this was the big shift. Of course, documentaries are not easier to make, but they are easier to start with, because you just take your camera and you film your everyday life. Jean-Luc Godard, who's my all-time favorite master of all-time cinema universe, used to say, if you want to make a film about others, make a documentary, and if you want to make a film about yourself, make a fiction. And this is what we saw with the documentaries, filming other people. And then fictions, much fewer fictions were made, like what we did, and a few others made fictions also. Are, when you look at the translator, we can talk about it, is really a film about ourselves, about our own guilt in what happened during the revolution. Rana?
It's interesting also to think that, it was purposeful that Syria would not make films, because they also didn't want people to gather. This is one of the things that the Assad regime did, right? Was they were threatened by any event in which people might be seen as having some sort of collective organized experience, right? But I'm really hopeful. actually, I feel really hopeful about what's next. When we were just in Damascus a few weeks ago, we stumbled upon an independent film company that has recently started up in Syria. And they are training young Syrian filmmakers.
What are they
That's part
called?
of, I don't remember the name. Anas, do you remember?
Oh, I have to look
Okay,
it
I
up.
have to look it
you
up.
can message me the name later. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
I should have had the name right here, but yeah, sorry about that.
so you're saying like cinema gathers people, but so does theater. And for some
Yeah.
reason, at least until the
Yeah.
90s, I would say the Syrian government heavily funded state propaganda, but theater nonetheless.
Yeah.
So what's the
Again,
difference? Why
yeah,
would
I mean,
cinema be more
so
impactful?
film can travel,
Mm.
and theater doesn't. I'm wondering if, that's also a part of it. And maybe it just wasn't his taste.
Could be.
He just wasn't a cinephile.
Yeah.
Maybe it's as dumb as that.
So I can tell that you guys feel something towards Syria. Like I wouldn't. Is it a duty? I don't know if that's the right word, but there is something you want to tell the world about the country, right?
Yeah.
Yet, when you did your most recent exhibition, Depart, right? Anas, you chose Beirut. Why not do it in Damascus?
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't choose Beirut. Actually, so just a little bit of context. Sorry. I went back to Syria after 2012. I went back in December 2024 after the fall of the regime, which was December 8th, as we know. And my mother was still there. She had never left Syria. She didn't want to leave. She said, I want to stay in Syria. I die in my country. I want to die in my home. I don't want to die in my bed. This is what she said. And when the regime fell, we called her with my brother and sister. They both live in Europe. And we said, okay, we're coming to see you. And she said, no, wait a little bit. It's a great news. It's a miracle, but it's too early. It's still chaotic. We wanted to come very, very soon after December 8th. And she said, wait. And we waited. And we said, we're coming next week. And she said, no, you should wait longer, etc. And finally, when we arrived, she had passed just a few days before we arrived. So this was really, really tragic and very complicated for us to be back in Syria to see our mother after the liberation of the country, and we didn't see her. We saw her at the grave. So this was a very emotional time and a very full of contradiction emotions. And I took a lot of photos, and I showed these photos here in Doha to the cultural attaché at the French embassy. And we talked about it, and she said, we have to make an exhibition of this. So the French Embassy and the French Institute in Doha made the first exhibition in May 2025 of 74 photos of Damascus in December 2024, after the fall of the regime, 74 photos, because that was the age of my mother, Al-Rahman, when she passed. And it went really well. It was a really successful exhibition, alhamdulillah. And after that, he traveled to Amman. And after Amman, he traveled to Beirut. And now he's going to travel to Damascus in 2026. This year, we just have to find the right place to show it and the right time. But I'm already working on this to show it in Damascus. I think it's important to show it there where it happened, 1 year later. So this is how we traveled. From Damascus, the photos originated to Doha, to Amman, to Beirut, and back to Damascus. So that's the idea behind the whole project.
You said in one of the interviews about the exhibition that the name you chose has a lot of layers to it. There's the departure of your mother, may she rest in peace. There's the ousting of Assad, who departs from the country. There's your departure from Syria, right, in 2012. But there's also this feeling of emptiness in Damascus, and I'm hearing this not just from you. I'm hearing this from my friends who live in Damascus, from people who are just talking in social media. Damascus feels a bit different than the rest of the country for some reason. I don't know why. You were there. What did you experience? How was it? Why do you think people feel this sense of emptiness?
I don't know. I don't know about the word emptiness, but the different layers you mentioned. There's one more, which for me is, of course, besides the departure of my mother, like Hama, the main one is the departure of a new Syria. It's a new country. It's the rebirth of a new country, and a nouveau départ, a new departure. And that for me was so clear and obvious and so meaningful when I was there in December 2024, confirmed throughout the year 2025 when I went there 5 times, including last time with Rana last month, 1 year after the liberation. Yeah, it's a new country and it's a different country and it's a different people and it's just a new state of mind, a new state of Syria for a new life for everyone. And really, I wanted to catch that with the lens of
you both seem hopeful, and there's a large group in Syrian society who are genuinely hopeful about what's happening in the country. From an artistic point of view, as art makers, how do you feel the scene is? Because there's a lot of concerns given the government's Islamist backgrounds, that there will be some oppression of art. You do hear some complaints, like the Malas brothers that had this little feud with the Ministry of Culture during the year. You hear like mixed things depending on which area you ask on what is the government's approach towards liberal things like art and nightlife. And how is what are you seeing? Is it as bad as some rumors say? Is it really good? Is it just developing?
So this, just to get back a second to this new company, they're called Stories Film Syria, and they're an Syrian production company supporting cultural cinema initiatives. And I guess they've been around for quite a while. I think Enes is more optimistic than I am. I'm very concerned about the status of women. And I don't see nearly enough attention being put on this, and even women being involved in the political process. And this is going to be a huge problem if that continues. I think, and women were saying that when we were there, that they were feeling that, and we're not feeling very hopeful. For example, the art schools are no longer allowed to teach students how to draw or paint a nude.
So anatomy, yeah.
Yeah, anatomy is forbidden. The rights governing women in terms of the private space, the home, are regressing when it comes to child custody. They're even worse now, apparently, than under the Assad regime.
Yeah.
We heard, there was even, in the beginning, Syria wasn't even convinced that they wanted to have a minister of culture at all. And then we've heard, of course, about, sort of various censorships about women at the beaches, about the curriculum in the schools, not being able to teach evolution. Those are all really concerning. On the other hand, is it a pleasure to see people talking Is it a pleasure to go and see all the little art galleries that are popping up and the creativity and the way that the people are selling new items? Absolutely.
I mean, I see like there's a duality in Syria happening, because a lot of these laws that people are talking about are not new. Like, so for example, the custody law is just what used to be the case. The ministry just is reinforcing an old law. And there's a bunch of lawyers in Syria who were talking about this, that this is not like a new or a drastic change. It was just a law that was not kind of effective during Bashar's time, but during Hafiz's time, this was the same law for custody of children, issuing of documents. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm seeing exactly what you just mentioned. Like, when you look at the street, on the social level, people are doing one thing, but when you pick up like an official source of news, or you read like an official state document, you see something completely different. And the interaction between the Ministry of Culture and the Malas brothers is like a proof of that. If they were doing their plays throughout the country before interacting with the ministry and everything was fine, it became a problem once the ministry was involved.
Badr, can you give more context on this situation, like for the uninitiated?
Malas brothers.
On the Malas, yeah.
Yeah, we spoke about this earlier in the year. So they were doing a tour of their play. Like, they have a very famous play. And then they were invited by the Ministry of Culture to perform it in a specific place. And then suddenly the ministry starts to censor, and they eventually canceled their show without contacting the Malas brothers. And it turns out that someone in the ministry was threatening the Malas brothers, like, if you don't do what we say, we'll pull out funding. So they come out with a public statement saying, we don't care about funding, we've been doing fine without this. If this is how the ministry is going to behave, we're not going to do anything through the state. And they're not the only ones. Like, we've heard similar things from interaction with the Ministry of Media, for example. So this is why I'm asking you, like, Anas, you're saying you want to, or you will have an exhibition in Damascus. So how is that going? Did you get any questions where people are trying to censor you, or were there certain topics they wanted you not to talk about, or there were some photos that they tried to remove? Like, I'm trying to get it, like, an actual idea from you guys, because you're on the scene art-wise. Because I'm trying to understand, is what's happening in Syria remnants of the old regime, and we have a government that hasn't yet updated? Or is it a new direction of even more censorship and more restrictions?
I think it's new censorship, new kind of restrictions, because unfortunately, I think the Middle East cannot go without censorship, cannot go without restrictions. It probably one day it will, inshallah, but it's a very, very difficult habit and curse to get rid of, I think. So I believe, yes, they want to make some kind of new restrictions just to prove that they are in control. You know, it's about control. And regarding the photos and the exhibition, I'm still in the process of organizing it and proposing it. So I'll let you know later on. You can mention it in another episode of your podcast. But for now, no, it's not like that. Even for a film that I already proposed to the Muassasat Cinema, the Syrian Film Commission, they want to get back to me about what they think and probably the restrictions they want to propose about it, again, because it's their way of proving that they are there. So I'm not saying this is a good thing, not at all. Huh? I am optimistic, yes. I don't think they're gonna go full blast on Islamization of the society more than it already is. But let's be clear, Syria is a very religious society. You cannot deny that. Not everyone is, but majority of the society is very religious. And we're not very religious in our family, in our house, in our home, but you have to acknowledge that. So how far can they go towards this extreme, knowing that the whole world is watching Syria right now, because the whole world is betting and wanting a piece of the new Syria, of the new departure of Syria, of the future of Syria. So I'm not sure they can go crazy. I really am not sure they can do that, because there would be consequences. So I think they're gonna play wise. I hope so. I hope so. If that's clear what I'm saying.
If I can add one thing, like I shared like the concern of like women need to be part of the political scene, need to exist, need to be represented, and their perspective need to be there, because like statistics like say that there are like 1.8 million orphan kids who are staying with their mothers. So actually women are the majority of breadwinners in Syria. So this, like, if they cannot be represented, their perspective can't if they can't be they can't like participate, be in like be represented, like you can't do anything. We see like more than 1,000 refugee camps are still in the north, like especially in this time of year is tragic. And like women is I think should be one of the main priorities for any program like the government is working on now. Yeah. And when we go back to the Syrian drama, TV shows, maybe before 2011, I have like some comments I would like to add, maybe later.
No, do it now.
Yeah, so I actually share like your perspective, and I think we can all agree that the corniness and the idea of the بيئة الشامية, باب الحارة, that was regurgitated in maybe tens of shows, and it might be historically inaccurate that at the time, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, Damascus used to be this way. No, there were actually people going to universities. There were doctors, nurses, schools, modern schools. And the other side, which I would like to hear like your perspective here, like if you would like to comment on بقعة ضوء, مرايا, ضيعة ضايعة, sometimes like other shows, they used to touch on like they used to have like a character of authority that you cannot disagree with. You should like follow and like keep your mouth shut. And we like sometimes we used to see it like as, oh, like, are they like allowed to say that? So what's your perspective on this? Why did the regime allow such such narratives, or like such characters to be shown? Like someone from Mukhabarat is actually a person of like authority.
I mean, it's such a good question. I've asked myself the same thing, like why did they approve of some characters? And one idea I had when I was thinking about this is, part of them must love to see themselves portrayed in cinema or TV in this way, like thinking of themselves as like the mafia, as Al Capone, as the Goodfellas, you know what I mean? Like, I do think that there is this enjoyment of feeling this, like they
Yeah.
are this kind of character.
And like maybe the funniest is on MBC, and it was quite popular, the مسلسل هيبة. If you know this about like this cartel in Lebanon that was like very influential and had more like social, like had like dimensions of being like close to society and doing social services while being like the biggest cartel that is like doing illegal things, and glorifying this kind of characters on like the biggest TV channel in the Arab world. So it was crazy.
Yeah.
Like yeah, it's always mind-boggling for me, like the choices that maybe it gives you like you cannot. I even saw this in Egypt. Even the president was like, we shouldn't be doing this anymore, glorifying thugs and glorifying. What are we doing, guys? Like, well, we're actually like, what are we doing? Like, it's not actually something's wrong like here.
But it's really, you know, there are two things. What you mentioned, that in some musalsalat they let a mukhabarat character talk freely. I think this is the regime in Syria wanting to show like, look, you can actually say whatever you want, but everybody knows it's not true. And then the criminals and the gangs is really something of, I think, of the culture, you know, in the Arab world, unfortunately. Okay, an example, look at Carlos Rosson, you know, the head of
Yeah.
Nissan, and Renault, who escaped from Japan because he was wanted by the justice system over there. And he came back to Lebanon, and he's living happily in Lebanon. Well, he cannot travel anywhere, but he's moving around Lebanon, no problem. And people go and salute him and say hi to him in the streets and restaurants. And he's really a criminal. I mean,
and he's managed to actually even show himself as the المظلوم,
The victim.
the person
Going
who's
on
done
podcasts
injustice.
and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And people think this guy is a hero, but he's, of course, he's a criminal. He didn't do anyone, but he stole millions of dollars, and he made some mafia business. So this is okay in Lebanon, and not only in Lebanon, you know. So there is this deeply rooted that you know, like you mentioned, the Goodfellas, the Godfather is something to aspire to, and this is really weird. To still think this is not the 70s and the 80s anymore. There's another level of morals and ethics that should be considered for sure for the new generation.
So we shouldn't go to school or study university and be like try to seek like other like ventures and be good at math or good at something and be an innovator.
Yeah.
You should like see like be Azhar in Al-Hara. You should be like Muhammad Ramadan, or like someone from who like takes their rights with their hands, and we should like so we're not governed by law. We're not like
yes.
Yeah,
good point.
It's crazy.
Yeah. This is very good what you were just saying. You know, that you're meant to participate in the corruption.
Yes,
that's what you're supposed to do.
It's attractive.
That, yes. But also like بقعة ضوء is a show that I've actually studied. I wrote actual papers on this. In the first skit of the show, which was in the media, for those who don't know, this was portrayed as like, this is the next step in Syrian evolution. The president has allowed us to speak freely. He's gathered all the directors and the actors, and he's like given us green light to say the truth. First skit of this show shows Ayman Rida walking in a narrow old Damascus alley, being pushed in different directions by these figures in black suits and sunglasses. And it's a very clear metaphor. This is like the secret service, mukhabarat, and he's trying to walk without seeing them, and they just keep moving him as they see fit. Years later, during the revolution, in I think the last or one of the the last seasons of بقعة ضوء, you have an episode with Al-Amairi. He's supposedly a prisoner who's been released from from Sednaya. And what they're showing you in this episode is the PTSD behavior of someone who leaves jail. And the message here is you become this guy if you try to do anything. Like, they're showing you someone who goes to the bathroom for 15 seconds, protects his head. If he hears a sound, he gets on the floor and like puts his head on his, and he eats in like 20 seconds, and he's very domesticated, like the typical stories that we've been hearing from Sednaya. This is state media showing it while publicly denying that these stories are happening. And this is a clear message to me, like, you become this guy if you ever try to revolt or go against the government. So there's this very like complex relationship between us as Syrians and the TV screen and what we see through it. Because we love these shows. We spend countless hours watching them because it's the only representation we get in a non-democratic country. We see these real stories of impoverished families, kidnapped kids, drug-addicted fathers, abused mothers, disappeared people, police officers. This is what Syrian cinematography has been about for the past God knows how long. So there was definitely like an element of control.
But there's like also what we talked about, like also the other side is like people, the Arab world used to know Syria through the actors in these shows, but now the actors are like categorized that you are like closer to the regime, and no, you are not. And maybe people like the Arab world now is looking at Syria through a different lens, and this lens can be, I think, what is good now is that maybe everyone can participate in drawing the new picture of Syria, such as Rana and Anas. Hopefully, me and you would try to do something, make the country look better. Yeah. So this is actually cool, is that we're not only shown through the lens of the government, and hopefully this government will not restrict and khalas, we will show only these two Bab al-Haras with a new narrative, shitty Bab al-Hara and Mukhtar, and no, hopefully like everyone will have their own voice and their own story.
How can cinema help us as like a post-war torn society with so many layers of issues and historically unresolved problems?
I was at Cinemed, which is a festival in Montpellier, end of October, and they had a focus on Syria. Syria cinema, the future of Syria cinema. Very, very relevant and a good idea. And they screened The Translator 3 times, plus other Syrian films from the revolution. Mostly documentaries, but a few fiction films, among them The Translator. And there were different panels with Syrians who had left diaspora and Syrians who had stayed in Syria. They were all together on panels in south of France. It was really, really a great initiative. And while some filmmakers, myself included, were talking about making films, what happened during the war, what happened. So Translator is about the inception of the revolution, March 2011. Another film I'm working on is called The Photographer, about the Caesar files, the Caesar photos, what happened in 2015, how he took the photos, smuggled the photos out, went to the US, etc. We all know the story. And another film I want to make is also about something that happens in 2016, etc. And a lot of Syrians, mainly almost exclusively the ones who had stayed in Syria, they said, that's it. We don't want to talk about that stories anymore. We want to talk about the future now. Forget the past. We want to talk about the future. So there was this conflict of point of view. Let's keep the past in place and make films about what happened and then move on. And others saying, no, let's move on right now. And that was really, really interesting for me to witness that. And think that some artists, some filmmakers don't want to waste time with what they already know, the horror they've been through because they stayed there and they lived through this, and just moving on and create something completely new that has nothing to do with the past. So this is a reality today between those different groups of filmmakers and artists in general, wanting to tell stories about the past or about the future.
It's interesting, this tension that will continue to play out between those who left and those who stayed. And, because it was so isolated in terms of a media point of view, and journalists couldn't get in to report on what was happening, even though, citizens were releasing the videos of what was happening. The focus, it feels, on so much of the storytelling that we got throughout the war was an emphasis on those who left, right? And what it meant to go across the sea, what it meant to have to walk on foot to reestablish a new life in Europe, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I hope we see, I hope that this chasm that is already there between those who stayed and those who left will be treated gently. Like, I think we need to treat this gently, and I think we need to really honor those that stayed. And especially because those that are coming back are also coming back with new language skills. They were able to get better healthcare. They were able to get a better education. They were exposed to, quote unquote, more democratic lives, systems of government. They come back with money, etc., versus the ones that stayed and really had to suffer.
I mean, you see a lot of countries that went through, not similar, but same category of destruction and social chaos, like countries in the Soviet Union, and you see the cinema of those countries, like, for example, the Russian film Stalker, the one about the pre-Chernobyl Stalker movie, and then years later you have another Russian film called The Island. It's about a priest who lives in this very secluded island with underdeveloped, no water, no electricity. So you see these kind of treatments of past, present, future. And I'm wondering if film in Syria should be one talking to Syrians or to the rest of the world, because during the revolution we weren't necessarily talking to ourselves. We were trying to get attention from outside to what's happening inside. That's what the translator is, in a very complex way, inside the film and outside the film. That's what you're doing. But I wonder if it is a duty of an art maker or someone with a message who is a filmmaker somehow, if they do have a duty, you think, to speak to Syrians directly now, or such a duty doesn't exist.
I mean, I think, after we made the translator, and Enes and I were sort of going in different directions about where we wanted to focus next as storytellers. I remember a woman came up to me after the translator and she said, "Khalas, we've had enough. We know the story. It's a horrible story. We need to laugh. We need to remember what it is to be human. We need to love. We need to see," and so seeing those images become very important for us as people, right? Because you start to become, we start to become defined by what we see. These images are not unpolitical. All of these are very political. So I think, that's partly why I was, decided to make the next film that I'm making was purposefully done to have a lot of humor and charm, was in direct response to what this audience member, this Syrian woman, was telling me what she needed.
Is this the Hakawati's daughter?
Then this is the Hakawati's daughter. Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. It's still going to take a while, but yeah, there's so what's interesting about the film is that even though there's the charm and the humor throughout it, the other thing that I think excites me is that it goes back to 1960. So it's a different time when the United Arab Republic and Nasserism and talk of Arab unification is happening. The very laws that women were given the right to work, to vote, to have an education. Nasser was now going to look at the family laws regarding inheritance, marriage, divorce, child custody, all of this stuff. There were socialists, there were communists, there was this really vibrant political dialogue happening. And of course, all of that fell apart and gave way to Hafez al-Assad to be able to take power, right? And then that's what we got in Syria for the next 54 years was that. And so part of what this film I'm hoping will do, in addition to the remembering the charm and the humor and all of this stuff of that era, like Damascus International Film, festivals and like all the things that were happening, is that it's a way for people to go back and say, oh, where were we? Maybe we need to remember where we were headed before the rise of dictatorship or complete Islamification and all of this kind of thing that we have now in the society, environmental degradation, I think that's the other thing that's just heartbreaking to go to Syria and see is it's broken.
Yeah.
It's broken. The infrastructure is broken and it's not clean. It doesn't work. And yet people are doing it. People are doing it.
Yeah. I mean, even nature has been impacted until the recent rains. Rivers were just dry, lakes were dry.
Yes.
Yeah. The trees, like there's visibly less greenery in the country, less trees, less orchards, and yeah, it's really sad.
I remember this is sorry.
Yeah, go on.
You were about I just maybe this last comment because it was something that Anis's mother said, which lived with me, which is that what worried her so much about what happened during the war is she said, fine, you want to talk about inflation, lack of electricity, lack of water, lack of job, war, healthcare, education, blah, 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 blah. But for her, the worst part was that she saw that morality was being compromised. And that a society that loses its morality cannot work. And I think part of what I was glad to see in going back now in December was that I saw it. I saw that morality could come back. It's going to be rough, like you said, when you go to Homs and you see that this part of the city is living well and this part isn't. Let's see. It's going to take time.
Yeah. I wanna get to the translator. We left this till the end. It's a very heavy movie. For those who are very aware of what was going on in Syria, it's very heavy for those who were impacted by similar stories, and there's hundreds of thousands of people like that. But now the reality is different, right? Like, this is not happening anymore. And this is going back to the point you just mentioned by the comment from one of your viewers, we're sick of hearing this. How much of this balance should we keep? Like, for me now, the translator has transformed post December 2024 from this is what's happening to this is a documentation. This is sort of like a fictionalization of history now. It's not an ongoing event anymore.
Yeah.
And film is really a very important and effective method of keeping memory, collective national memory somehow.
Yeah.
Where do we strike the balance? Right? Like if you were to give an advice to an aspiring filmmaker now in Syria, yes, they have to tell their truth and speak their story, but if you were to give them a constructive advice, where's the line between being stuck in the past and preserving memory and talking about a future? If I am going to write a film now, should I try to show the audience how I want the future to look like and hopefully try to impact people? Should I focus more on telling what's happening now, show conflict and tension between Syrians, or should I stay in the past and keep talking about what happened?
Tough one. I think artists today and filmmakers, because we are filmmakers, have to ask also a question that's, according to me, is not asked enough by filmmakers themselves, is what kind of films, what kind of stories they want to see as an audience, to put themselves in the shoes of an audience, and okay, what do I want to see? Of course, I want to see a film about Syria, about my country, about my people, but what kind of film? Tragic, depressing, happy ending, and I think this question, if asked, can lead to making choices and decisions towards creation of a narrative, of a work of art as a film that can be clearer in the mind of the person who asked this question, I think. What do you think?
I think it depends on the storyteller. A storyteller has very personal reasons for why they want to tell a story, and they'll connect to a certain audience. I think the biggest question to my mind is how to get the right tools in the hands of these Syrian storytellers so that they can tell these stories well, whatever it is the story is.
Yeah. All right, now we'll end with like short questions that we usually ask our new friends of أهلية بمحلية. Welcome to the family, guys. What was Syria to you before liberation? Well, before revolution, during revolution, and after liberation?
I thought I would never see Syria again after I left. Honestly, in 2012, I was hoping our children, maybe would see Syria again. I was convinced I would never see Syria again because of Assad dynasty continuing. Yeah. I looked at North Korea. North Korea dynasty is going on since 1948 and it's still on. I was like, shit, these guys are going to stay. And Hafiz Assad Jr. is on his way up. And that was really very, very depressing. I would cry. So that was a very dark 14 years span of thinking that and being convinced, persuaded of that. And then the miracle happens and everything changed. And that was the best feeling ever. Just for 10 days until my mother passed 17th of December, and that was a tragedy again. So
الله يرحمها.
الله يرحمها. تعيش الله يرحمها إن شاء الله. That was really the emotional roller coaster for me of Syria, in and out of Syria. So yeah, it was very intense.
I mean, I just remember, growing up, and I just remember feeling so disappointed that Syria was the way it was. I just thought, wow, it's, when you go and you see the history and the culture and the possibility, and then it was stagnating. I just thought that was always really disappointing. And then throughout the war, I mean, it was just, it was, again, it was just a very negative, like horrific thing. And then now, I mean, let's wait and see. But like Enes, I never thought I'd be back. I mean, I was with Enes, you know, when we were just there now, and I kept saying to him, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm looking at this place. I can't believe I'm sitting in this space. I can't believe I'm walking through the old city. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, a year later, it still takes me time to process every time I'm there that I'm actually there.
Complete.
Um,
It's insane. Very.
yeah.
Very.
And now, post-revolution, post-liberation, what is Syria to you now?
A big canvas ready to be painted on. It's a new opportunity. Anything is possible. For me, it's really a full potential, ready to be designed and written and painted and crafted. I really think that. I hope I'm that.
I guess one question I have is, how fragile or stable is everything now? When we look, you know, at the fall of the United Arab Republic up until the year that Hafiz al-Assad was elected, there was a coup every year. Are we in that space again? Or are the controls, the regional controls over Shara's role so in place that this is what it is, khalas, period? Like this is one question I have, is how fragile or stable is this?
I mean, we're in a very ambiguous historical period. Like, while we're talking now, Trump goes into Venezuela.
I just got the feed.
It's like
They captured the guy and his wife in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So we're in a really ambiguous historical period. Like, me and Abdurrahman always talk about this. Like, the international system is not what it was post World War II anymore. Like, we're in a completely different reality now. It's an infant, and it happens that the new Syria was born with the birth of this new international system, with Trump's second term.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
it's a very ambiguous period. Yeah. Sorry, like, we're running into the end of our time because we try not to go more than an hour and a half. Any last words, any last messages you'd like to give your friends, audiences, our viewers in general? Yeah, you don't have to.
I mean, no, I guess, I mean, Badr and Abdurrahman, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Looking forward to have more like conversations like these, inshallah.
I would really love that. I loved this space just now. Thank you for giving it.
Thank
you guys, and have a great day.
Thanks.
You too, guys. Good luck.
شكرا لمتابعينا اللي قعدوا معنا لآخر الحلقة. This will be subtitled, so don't worry about it.